In this video, we're going to look at interpreting timetables. So the timetable below gives the times of trains from Far Forest to Uppercut. So using this timetable, we want to answer some questions. And the first question is, how long does it take to get from Far Forest to High Hill on the 1745 train? So Far Forest at 1745 is the first column, and we want to go to High Hill, which is the third row, and so it tells us that it's going to arrive at 1820. So we need to draw our number line with our departure and arrival times on it. So we're leaving at 1745 from Far Forest and getting to High Hill at 1820. It's always sensible to go through o'clocks, so we know that 1800 hours is between 1745 and 1820, and that's 15 minutes between 1745 and 1800, and 20 minutes between 1800 and 1820. Remember, there are not 100 minutes in an hour. There's 60. So 15 plus 20 equals 35 minutes. So it takes 35 minutes to get from Far Forest to High Hill on the 1745 train. Be careful to choose the correct train when you're working with timetables. Our second question for this timetable is, the 1953 train from Far Forest arrives at Uppercut 38 minutes late. When does it arrive? So let's look at the 1953 train, which is the second column, and it should arrive in Uppercut at 20:48, but it's 38 minutes late. So we're going to have to take the arrival time and add on 38 minutes. So we want to draw our timeline, and we're going to start at 20:48, which is the time the train should have arrived at Uppercut, and we're going to add on 38 minutes to work out when the actual arrival time was. Again, we're going to go through o'clocks, so we're going to break down that 38 minutes. So to get to the next o'clock, which would be 2100 or 9 p.m., and that would take 12 minutes from 20:48. And if we do 38 take away 12, that leaves us with a further 26 minutes to take us to our actual arrival time. And if we add 26 minutes on to 2100 hours, we get 21:26 or 9:26 p.m. So we answer the question, when does it arrive? And the 1953 train arrives at 21:26. And remember, you can write it in 24-hour clock or 12-hour clock. Now, a time zone is one of the areas into which the world is divided where the time is calculated as being a particular number of hours behind or ahead of Coordinated Universal Time, previously known as Greenwich Mean Time or GMT, the time in the UK. Time zones tend to follow boundaries between countries and their subdivisions instead of strictly following lines of longitude, as it makes sense for areas in frequent communication to keep the same time. Areas east of UTC are ahead by a number of hours, and west of UTC are behind by a number of hours. So, in this example, Jodie flew from Manchester to Prague for a short break. The plane left at 11:49 UK time and arrived in Prague at 14:07 UK time. In part A, we want to work out how long was the flight. So we need to draw our timeline, and we're going to have the time that Jodie left Manchester at the start and the time that she arrived in Prague at the end. And you can see that both times have been given in UK time or UTC, and therefore we don't need to do any extra calculations before we start. So we've got a leaving time of 11:49 and an arrival time of 14:07. And we know that 1200 hours is the first o'clock after 11:49, and it occurs 11 minutes after. Then we need to go to the o'clock before 14:07, which is 1400 hours or 2 p.m., and that's 2 hours after 12 o'clock. And then we have 7 minutes to take us from 1400 hours to 1407. So if we add the hours and minutes together, we get the length of the flight. And so the flight took 2 hours, and 7 plus 11 gives us 18 minutes. So the flight took 2 hours, 18 minutes. Now in part B, if the time in Prague is 1 hour ahead, what is the local time when she lands? So it says Prague is 1 hour ahead, and we want to know the time when she lands. And we know from the question that she arrived in Prague at 1407 UK time. So if we take 1407 UK time and add on 1 hour, we'll get the time in Prague. And so the time in Prague is 1507 Prague time. Now we can write that in 12-hour clock by taking away 12, and it's 3:07 p.m. Our final example, Jenny flew from New York to Los Angeles on business. The plane left at 21:50 local time and arrived in LA at 01:16 local time. If the time in LA is 3 hours behind the time in New York, how long was the flight? So for this example, we have a departure time in New York time, and we've got an arrival time in LA time. And so we have to have it in the same time before we can work out the time difference or the time interval. So Jenny left New York at New York local time, which was 21:50. And she arrived in LA at 01:16 local time, so that's 01:16 LA time. Now it tells us in the question that LA is 3 hours behind the time in New York because there are more than one time zone across the United States. So in order to work out the time interval, we can either work out what time Jenny left New York in LA time, and we can do that by 21:50 take away 3, and that equals 1850 hours LA time. Or we could work out what time she arrived in New York time, and we do that by taking the 01:16 and adding on 3 to give us 04:16 New York time. Now we can work out the time interval by using our o'clocks. So we know that the first o'clock after 21:50 is 10 minutes later, and it would be 2200 New York time, or 10 p.m. Or if we're working in LA time, it would be 1900 hours, or 7 p.m. Then we need to work out how many hours it is to the nearest o'clock before 04:16 or 01:16. And there are 6 hours between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. the next day, or there are 6 hours between 7 p.m. and 1 a.m. the next day in LA time. And finally, we need our minutes from 0400 or 0100 to 04:16 or 01:16, which is 16 minutes. So the length of the flight, we add the hours and minutes together. So the flight from New York to Los Angeles for Jenny's business trip took 6 hours and 26 minutes.